So stepping back just a little bit, you know, what kind of NoSQL are you using, and why did you choose what you're using?
Yeah, and so I think the way we think about it, and so there's SQL, which I actually hadn't heard till today. Lots of other people talk about.
I coined that, so I'm trying to get it to take off, you know, spread the word.
I've heard other people use aside SQL, and it's, you know, I think there's lots of different technologies, and they have strengths, they have weaknesses. Specific NoSQL technologies we have some that are homegrown. We use MongoDB and we use Voldemort. Those are the primary ones. And essentially the way we approach this is when we're starting a new project. Everybody knows that at Gilt Group we don't do any caching, so you're not allowed to cache. So then you say, okay, I need to store this piece of data. How do I do that? And then there's basically a few options. We use Postgres as the main relational database. You can use that. It's good for a lot of things. You can use MongoDB. That's good for a lot of things, particularly around queryability. If it's really a key value store or you care a lot about the specific variability in response time, there's Voldemort, which is packaged up into a RESTful interface. And ultimately, it's up to the teams and the engineers to say, here's a piece of data, here's a click on the website that we want to handle. What's the best technology that we want to use to handle that click? And as you look at Gilt Group today, the technology stack is not that deep, but it's really, really broad. And almost every single click that a customer makes on the website, there's dedicated software that's built to handle that specific click, and almost end-to-end stack for that click. Is there a question?
Well, I'm hearing your description, and I'm misinterpreting it. Basically, you've also hidden the database from the actual application. So should
Yes.
you need to move it to a different underlying technology, it is doable.
Yeah.
With care.
Oh, everything with
So
care.
You don't step on a landmine while you're doing the transition.
Yeah, and there's lots of neat things. One thing we liked about Voldemort is you choose the persistence engine on each individual node, and it doesn't even have to be homogeneous. You can have node 1 running MySQL, node 2 running MongoDB.
As long as you meet the attributes, you're fine.
Yeah, you're fine.
Grammar.
Yeah, and we did want to hide that from developers, right? And so the key value thing for sensitive systems at Gilt, the fact that you only have get and put and people aren't querying at the same time is really, really important. Then if you want to query, it's really, really hard. You start looking at, do you message and then put it into a relational database or some other system where you can actually run the queries? But we try to separate as much as possible. Yep.
So which of your products actually is responsible for how many widgets you have to sell at noon?
Yeah, so that's we have a service called the inventory service. That one's homegrown. It's the way Gilt works. That particular transaction is the one that takes the largest beating at Gilt, and so we that's actually done within custom in-memory, very very sophisticated database, which is basically a hash map. Yeah, and then from there, if the hash map says you got it, it goes into a document that gets put into Voldemort. The order processing system will go through a series of different key value stores, and then ultimately there's a messaging system. Your order will get moved from one of the key value stores into a relational database, and then that goes down to the warehouses. In terms of sound bites for Gilt Group and the maturity of the technology, we like to say that we've put about $1 billion of e-commerce through the NoSQL technologies at Gilt so far.
That's impressive.
How are you making this hash map? Is it replicated across your services? I mean, how is it?
Yeah, that's a good lead-in question. Actually, we have a single point of failure on inventory, and we chose for the time being that was worth it. And the way it works in that, this is not really, it's kind of slight aside, but we really, really wanted performance and high scalability of the services. And so in the event of a failure, the cluster can be restarted in 3 nodes, and that takes about 2 seconds. And that's what happens. And so you'll have a blip. You could have a blip on inventory at Gilt Group in a failure, but we get an average response time. The last time we measured it was 780 microsecond average response time on the transaction for inventory on Gilt. But great question. Yeah. So one of the things, and let me know if this can answer your question, but we're doing a project right now where locality of data is really, really important. And the approach of using the Voldemort cluster would result in lots of individual requests to lots of nodes. And we decided that wasn't an appropriate use of the technology. And so for that project, we're actually using MongoDB and using that to help us with some of the locality and having actually a richer document to prevent that kind of network chatter. Really, at that point, it was once we chose to use Mongo for that, the feature set of MongoDB is pretty rich, and this just becomes automatic. And so really the only difference is the application is talking to a Mongo database for that particular purpose, and then we kind of trust Dwight and team to manage that for us.
So let me ask you, when you were looking at presenting, moving to a NoSQL environment and moving away from, the problems you were having, I guess, when you were trying to scale before, when you're presenting that to your team, what kind of went into that, and what was the biggest challenge in getting the company to adopt a NoSQL platform, or was it a challenge?
Yeah, we had the advantage that transaction times were getting slower.
Okay.
So that puts some clear focus.
If it's going to make it faster, then we'll try this new stuff.
You have to do something. And actually a lot of the work went into testing the solutions in advance. So if you think about it, if these systems fail, Gilt has no revenue, zero, right? There's no this is the platform for the business. And so we ended up testing, I think it was all of the reasonably mature solutions that were available in the open source market. This is early 2009. And we tested 12 different persistence engines, even in combination with some of these other technologies. And ultimately, the final test was a cluster of 4 running 1 billion transactions. And for cart, our use case was 1 million carts, 5K document size, 200,000 active with random access. And that was the benchmark. And we literally ran it for days at a time. It wasn't weeks. It was days at a time, but billions of transactions. And it was at the end of that we plotted everything. And the underlying characteristics is really kind of a fun plot. That probably would have been a good slide today. But you have things like Tokyo Cabinet, which are fantastic, and then you hit a wall and you run out of memory and it just stops, right? And it's that's not going to be a good choice for our use case for cart. And so where we ended up was Voldemort combined with Berkeley DB had a very high sustained transaction rate, and it had the nicest decay when you started hitting the limits of the machine. And that's something we really, really like, because now we can just monitor the throughput of the response time, and you can actually see the decay, and you have time to do something, as opposed to, why can't I put anything in my cart anymore? But I think the thing that we really focused on, there's a lot of testing that went on of what we thought was a good benchmark for the particular application, and then based on that was kind of the decision to use the technologies. And it was a crapshoot. I mean, it may or may not have worked.
But it did. So.
But this did, yeah.
And what's next for you guys? What are you guys? Can you tell us anything about what Gilt is planning for the future?
We're still selling lots of shoes. We just launched a food site called Gilt Taste, which is great. It's imagine buying food direct from farmers. It's amazing. Even the popcorn is this woman figured out that 479 degrees is the optimal temperature to pop popcorn, and it is so good. So that's Gilt Taste. We're launching a men's business with a broader selection for all the guys. My wife's pretty happy about that for me. And we have, and I think all of the businesses are growing. Our home business, a lot of new products are being introduced at the end of the year. So I think just across the board, lots of growth, lots of new products coming out of Gilt.
So then hopefully it won't be too long until there's another $1 billion worth of revenue pushed through NoSQL, right?
If things go well, it'll hopefully be pretty soon. So.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.